Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be going over the NFL slate on DraftKings for Week 5. We're going to take a look at some of my favorite plays for this Week 5 slate. Just kind of talk through each position. I'll hit on a couple guys that I like at each position. Just before we do get started, I would really appreciate it if you guys would drop a like on this video. Let me know down in the comments who are some of your favorite plays for this Week 5 slate. Who are some players that you're going to be targeting. Also, if you want to see how my picks did last week for Week 4, I do make recap videos now. I will make those every Monday where I cover how my picks did. I'll talk about my lineups. I usually play one cash game lineup and then I play 3 GPP lineups. I'll cover those lineups, talk about how they did. Those videos go up every Monday. So if you do want to check out my Week 4 recap and see how my Week 4 picks did, you can check that video out. It's already up on my channel. My Week 5 recap video, going over my Week 5 picks, how they did, will most likely be up either Sunday night or Monday morning. So if you want to see how my picks do, I cover them every week, whether they're good or bad. I do talk about how my picks do. But also would appreciate it if you guys would subscribe to the channel if you have not already. A lot of the people watching my videos are not subscribed, so I'd definitely appreciate it if you would subscribe and click the notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload and you'll never miss out on any of my new videos. But let's start off at quarterback. I'm going to hit on 2 guys that I like at the quarterback position. So the first guy that I really like is Deshaun Watson. He's 6,700. If I'm paying up at quarterback, he's definitely the guy that I want to go to at the top. I love this spot for Deshaun Watson at home against the Falcons. This game has a lot of shootout potential. There are a bunch of plays I like for both teams. On the Falcons side, there's some guys I like. There's a lot of Texans players I like as well. This is definitely a great game to stack. You could do a game stack with like Watson, Hopkins, Fuller, and then run it back with like Julio or Devontae Freeman. Just a really good game in general to target. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to Deshaun Watson in my cash game lineup because I usually try and pay down at quarterback if I can. There is a lot of good value on the slate though, especially a receiver, so I might be able to get to Watson. If I can get up to him, I'll try to, but regardless, he's going to be a big part of my tournament teams. My 3 tournament lineups, he'll be for sure in one of them, if not more than one. So really like Deshaun Watson. Both of these teams' secondaries have struggled this year. Falcons and Texans secondaries have struggled a lot. We should see plenty of passing touchdowns in this game. And Deshaun Watson, just one of the highest upside quarterbacks for fantasy football. He can run the ball in there. He's got rushing upside. The Texans are going to throw the ball plenty. Deshaun Watson can throw the ball deep. So love paying up for him at quarterback if I can. If not, I'm fine going down to Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's the next guy I want to talk about. He's 5,700, $1,000 cheaper than Deshaun Watson. He's another quarterback in a great matchup and in another game that has a lot of shootout potential. Like this spot a lot for Andy Dalton at home against the Cardinals. Pretty much every team has been able to score on the Cardinals so far this year. At least the teams that they have faced have been able to score on them. Cardinals have had one of the worst defenses. I think the Bengals are going to be able to put up points easily in this game. People might be hesitant to click on Andy Dalton as well because we all watched that Monday night game against the Steelers when the Bengals just looked absolutely terrible. I think they only scored 3 points, didn't even get into the end zone. People might be hesitant to click on Dalton's name, but before that game against the Steelers, he was putting up pretty good numbers, even in tough matchups. Like he went on the road against Seattle. I'm not sure if they played Seattle at home or on the road, but against Seattle, he put up like 22 DK points. He had a pretty good game against San Francisco. I can't remember who they faced Week 1, but I know he had like 25 DK points in Week 1. Even in tough matchups, Andy Dalton's been putting up solid numbers this year. That was his first bad game of the year. This is definitely a bounce-back spot for Andy Dalton. I like him a lot at only 5,700. It's probably going to be between either him or Deshaun Watson, maybe Carson Wentz, on who I put in my cash game lineup because I think it boils down to those 3 guys. All 3 are in favorable matchups. Dalton's the cheapest at 5,700, so he'll probably be the guy that I go with, but regardless, I really like Andy Dalton a lot here. I think he's one of the better value quarterbacks on the slate. But those are just a couple of quarterbacks I'm going to be targeting. Now let's look at some running back plays that I like. So at the top, really like Christian McCaffrey as the spend-up option to go to this week. He's 8,700 on DraftKings. I believe there's 4 guys above 8K worth spending up for. You have McCaffrey, you have Alvin Kamara, you have Ezekiel Elliott, and you have Dalvin Cook. I think all 4 of those guys are in play this week. If I had to rank them, I think I would go McCaffrey number 1, Cook. Probably it's close between Cook or Elliott for second. I'd probably go Elliott second. So McCaffrey 1, Elliott 2, Cook 3, and then Kamara 4. But I think all are pretty good plays. This is definitely a slate where we got a lot of value at receiver, so you should be able to pay up for at least one of the expensive running backs, if not more. Nobody in fantasy football right now has a higher floor ceiling combo than Christian McCaffrey. He's touching the ball 25, 30 times a game. He's getting a ton of work in the passing game as well. Like last week against the Texans, he got 23 carries for like 90 yards, only averaged like 3 yards a carry, so he wasn't very efficient through the ground last week. But he got 10 targets, 10 catches, which kind of made up for that. I believe he almost had 100 yards receiving and 100 yards rushing. He was close to getting the 100-yard bonus for both. I believe he had finished with like 34 DraftKings points. So even if Christian McCaffrey is not super efficient, he's going to be able to exceed value just because of how much volume he gets, because of how heavy the workload is. 37 touches last week against Houston. I believe like 24 carries, or might have been even like 27 carries, 10 receptions. He's going to see so much volume. He's matchup proof. At home against Jacksonville, I would say he's probably a mediocre matchup, but McCaffrey's just going to get so much volume that I think he's one of the top projected running backs pretty much every week. And this week's no exception. We've got enough value to pay up for him, so might as well, especially in cash games. I think Christian McCaffrey's a guy that you want to try and fit in. The next guy we're going to talk about, I do like a lot. He's not up there with the 8K guys, just priced below them, but David Johnson at 7,500 is going to be someone I try and get to in cash games if possible. If I can, I'm probably going to try and pay up for all three, or play up for three of the expensive running backs. So whether that's McCaffrey, Elliott, Johnson, or McCaffrey, Cook, Johnson, I'm going to try and get all three of those guys in my cash game lineup because I think they all just give you such a high floor and high ceiling. This is a great spot for David Johnson facing the Bengals. Running backs have killed the Bengals this year. It's been a gold mine to take running backs against them. James Conner had a big game Monday night against the Bengals. Pretty much Conner and Samuels did. We saw some other running backs have a lot of success against the Bengals. Really good spot for David Johnson. He gets a ton of work in the passing game, amazing usage in the passing game, which always makes him a good play on DraftKings given the full PPR scoring. Christian Kirk is most likely going to miss this game as well, so that's going to free up some more targets. Should be able to get David Johnson some more looks in the passing game. You're going to see him probably line up in the slot a little bit more in this game with Christian Kirk out. It should be just a great game for David Johnson. I'd be surprised if he gets less than 20 touches. He's going to get probably 10, 15 carries. He's going to get most likely close to 10 targets. Just a great spot for David Johnson. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to the Bengals side of this game with Dalton. We're going to talk about some of the receivers who I like. Definitely want to run it back, and David Johnson's probably the first guy I'm going to be looking to run back my Bengals stacks. So really like him at 7,500. Another underpriced workhorse running back that's going to see 20-plus touches. Definitely a guy I'm trying to pay up for if I can. But since we did talk about a lot of the studs at the running back position, I do want to give a couple mid-range/value guys. So the first mid-range guy that I like is Aaron Jones. He's 5,900 on DraftKings. I think he's a really good play in that mid-range. He should be looking at a pretty heavy workload for this matchup against the Cowboys. Jamal Williams is most likely going to be out for this game after he got that concussion in the Thursday night game against the Eagles. Williams, it was a pretty rough hit. He wasn't able to come back to that game. I don't think he's practiced all week. I'm recording this on Thursday. I don't think Williams has practiced at all this week, so very likely that he sits out this game, which should lean to Aaron Jones getting a pretty heavy workload, at least 75-80% of the running back touches, I would imagine. It's a tough matchup against the Cowboys, no doubt. They do have a pretty stout defense, but I think the volume and the price tag make up for that. If a guy's going to get 20-plus touches and he's like under 6K, I think that automatically puts him in play, especially if he's going to get work in the passing game. And so far this year, Aaron Jones has been getting pretty good looks in the passing game. I know last week he got like 7 targets. He's had other games where he's got like 5-6 targets. So getting a look in the passing game with Jamal Williams out should be even better for Aaron Jones. That should just keep him on the field more. In third down situations, I imagine they're going to leave Aaron Jones on the field. I don't see Dexter Williams coming in and taking a bunch of work from Aaron Jones. So I really like him here. And I don't think he's going to be that high-owned either, so he does make for a pretty good tournament play. There's a guy we're going to talk about that's a little bit cheaper that I feel like is going to be pretty popular in that same price range. So Aaron Jones, definitely a guy you could use in tournaments. In cash games, like I said, I think I want to try and pay up for all the expensive running backs if possible. But if I need to go down to a cheaper running back in cash, Aaron Jones for sure is a viable option at 5,900 just because he's going to see so much volume and he's still really, really cheap. But this is one of the guys I think that's going to be popular that's probably going to take ownership away from Aaron Jones, and that's David Montgomery. David Montgomery's 5,200 on DraftKings. This is another play where you're just kind of playing him because he's going to see so much volume. Last week he got 24 touches. I can't remember what the matchup was, but he got 24 touches last week, 21 carries, got 3 targets. Just too cheap for the volume he should get. The price tag's way too cheap. It's a pretty good matchup as well against the Raiders. Raiders have definitely been much worse against the pass than the run. They're definitely a lot easier to throw on than they are to run on, but still, pretty good spot for David Montgomery. Like I said, 24 touches last week. That's just what we want for a guy in this price range. Anytime you're targeting mid-range or value running backs, you want them to see close to 20 touches if possible, and you want them to get some looks in the passing game, and so far that has been the case for David Montgomery. His workload is slowly starting to increase week by week. This is going to be a very favorable game script as well. You would imagine the Bears are going to be able to win this game against the Raiders. Even with Chase Daniel at quarterback, the Bears should be able to have a lead for most of this game, which should favor Montgomery, should lean to him getting plenty of carries late in the game. And honestly, with Chase Daniel at quarterback, the Bears are probably going to want to throw the ball as little as possible. So I could see David Montgomery getting 20, 25 carries in this game. And only 5,200 definitely makes sense as a cheaper running back. But those are some running backs I like for this week. Let's go ahead and move on to receiver. So at the top of the receiver position, I do like paying up for DeAndre Hopkins this week, especially if I'm playing Deshaun Watson and I want to stack him with someone. Hopkins is going to be the guy that I look to. He's expensive. He's 7,800. But this just feels like an eruption spot for DeAndre Hopkins. He's finally in a good matchup after 3 tough matchups the last 3 weeks. He had to go up against James Bradberry last week. That's a tough matchup against the Panthers secondary. He had to face the Chargers secondary, who do have really good corners. Casey Hayward, Desmond King. Those guys are pretty tough corners. And then I believe the week before that, the Texans had to play the Jaguars, so he had to match up with Jalen Ramsey. So he's had some tough matchups the last 3 weeks. Finally gets a good matchup against the Falcons. The Falcons secondary has not been good this year. They're missing Keanu Neal, which hurts them even more. I think you're going to be prioritizing the expensive running backs in cash games, but DeAndre Hopkins in tournaments is a guy that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to. This Falcons team just got torched by Marcus Mariota, A.J. Brown, and Corey Davis. Imagine what Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and Will Fuller should be able to do. They should be able to put up points with ease against this Falcons secondary. And if you're stacking this game, I think you definitely want to try and run it back with Julio Jones, who's also a really good play for just a little bit less. I think Julio's 7,600. Julio's in a great spot as well, so if you're doing the Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins stacks, and you want to run it back, Julio makes a lot of sense. But now let's talk about some of the cheaper receivers. A little bit cheaper than Hopkins, a guy that I really like is Michael Thomas. He's 6,600. I think he's one of the best point per dollar wide receivers on the slate. This price tag is just way too cheap for Michael Thomas, especially given the matchup against the Bucs. This Bucs secondary has been terrible this year. This is another game that has a lot of shootout potential. I think in cash games, given this price tag on Michael Thomas, he's probably one of the first guys you're going to be looking to for cash games, just given the value that he gives you. It's crazy to think that Michael Thomas could be a value receiver, but with how cheap he is, definitely in play as a value receiver. And even in a game last week against the Cowboys where the Saints only scored 12 points, Thomas was still putting up big numbers. He still went for 9 and 95, had 9 catches, 95 yards. I believe he finished with like close to 19 DraftKings points. Even with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, Michael Thomas has still been consistent and still been putting up good numbers. And the price tag's baked into the fact that Bridgewater's at quarterback. Like if Drew Brees was quarterbacking this game, Michael Thomas would probably be the most expensive receiver on the slate. So I think we take advantage of this price tag, play Michael Thomas in cash games, in tournaments. I want to have some exposure to him as well. I think you could definitely stack him with Bridgewater. Bridgewater's really cheap at 5,200. It's just a really good spot for the Saints in general, playing at home in the Superdome against a bad Bucs defense. Really like Michael Thomas at the wide receiver position. But now I want to talk about a couple value receivers that I like. So the first guy is Will Fuller. He's 4,500 on DraftKings. Will Fuller has missed out on a lot of long touchdowns the last few weeks. Last week against the Panthers, there was a touchdown that literally went right through his hands, or Deshaun Watson just overthrew him. It was like a 70, 75-yard touchdown that he just missed on. I think this could potentially be the week they connect on that long touchdown. Will Fuller is eventually going to have a monster game where he goes off for 25, 30 DraftKings points. And I think this could definitely be the week. Same with Hopkins. It's a great matchup for Will Fuller against this bad Falcons secondary who, like I said earlier, is missing Keanu Neal. And you also have another good cheap receiver in play from this game on the Texans side. Kenny Stills is looking pretty questionable to play. I believe he has a hamstring injury. He got injured last week. That could lean to Kiki Kuti getting some more snaps at wide receiver, potentially as the wide receiver 3. So you could definitely look to him as a value play. He's only 3,400. I'm going to be very heavy on the Texans receivers this week. I love DeAndre Hopkins to pay up for. I think Will Fuller is a great value. If Kenny Stills winds up sitting this game, I think Kiki Kuti becomes in play as a value at 3,400. Really like the Texans receivers here. Probably going to use Will Fuller in cash, just given his price tag, and I'm going to be looking for value at receiver. So definitely a guy I'm going to be going to at 4,500. But now the last value receiver we're going to talk about is Alden Tate. He's 3,500 on DraftKings. I think he's probably the best value wide receiver on the board this week. He's going to be very popular. I imagine he'll be one of the more popular plays on the slate, but for good reason. In cash games, I think he's probably one of the first guys you should be plugging in your lineup just because of how cheap he is, the targets he should see, and playing him at wide receiver is going to allow you to get in the expensive running backs. He was already playing a good amount of snaps. Before John Ross got injured, he was already getting plenty of targets. I believe the last 2 weeks he's got 16 total targets the last 2 weeks. Now with John Ross out, Alden Tate should just be playing even more snaps, should be looking at even more targets, and he's still so cheap at 3,500. Plus, you factor in the matchup against this very bad Cardinals secondary. The Cardinals are still missing Patrick Peterson, who is suspended. When Patrick Peterson comes back, their secondary will be better, but while Peterson's out, this is going to be a team we look to attack, and really like going to Alden Tate here. Probably going to stack him up with Andy Dalton in cash games. You could definitely look to Tyler Boyd as well, but I don't know if Tyler Boyd's really going to be an optimal cash play this week. Probably would rather play like Michael Thomas, who I think is like the same price as Tyler Boyd. But Alden Tate I like a lot as a value receiver, only 3,500. But now we're going to take a look at one tight end I like and then one defense before we end the video. So the tight end that I like this week is Noah Fant. He's only 2,800 on DraftKings. He is very, very cheap. He hasn't seen a ton of volume the last 4 weeks. I believe he's seen about 4 targets a game, but he is playing a large majority of the offensive snaps for the Broncos. He does give you a lot of big playability at a pretty weak tight end position. This is definitely a position I feel like I'm going to be paying down at this week. There's not a lot of good options to pay up for. There's some good value below 4K, like you got Jimmy Graham for cheap, you got O.J. Howard for cheap, Tyler Eifert's pretty cheap, Noah Fant's only 2,800. Those are probably the guys I'm going to be looking to at tight end. Doesn't feel like a position I'm going to be paying up for. Game script should also favor Noah Fant this week. The Broncos most likely are going to lose this game. They're most likely going to be trailing for a large majority of the game, so they're going to have to throw the ball. Wouldn't be surprised if Noah Fant gets probably like 6-7 targets. He did get into the end zone last week, did take a screen 20 or 30 yards to the house. He is very athletic, so I do like going to him as a cheap tight end. Very interesting to see how much Tyler Eifert is owned this week. Tyler Eifert facing the Cardinals. We know how bad the Cardinals have been against tight ends. I think Eifert's $500 more than Noah Fant. If Eifert's going to be significantly higher owned than Fant, then I think in GPPs playing Noah Fant makes a lot of sense for 500 less. Regardless, I think he's just a good value tight end in general. But now let's talk about a cheap defense I like before we end the video. So I'm going to be looking to the Steelers as a cheap defense this week. They're only 2,100. Rarely do we get a defense this cheap playing at home, unless it's like the Redskins or the Dolphins who have a terrible defense. But regardless, I do like the Steelers here. It is a tough matchup facing the Ravens. The Ravens do have a very good offense, but I feel like this could be a low-scoring game. It is a divisional game. Seems like these Steelers-Raven games are always pretty low-scoring. I think this one could be lower-scoring than people expect. And even though it's a bit skewed because the Steelers faced the Bengals last week, in that Monday night game, they looked really, really good. Their defense looked good. They were getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I know the Bengals' offensive line was terrible, and that's one of the reasons why, but still, the Steelers' defense looked really good Monday night. Playing at home for very cheap, I think this is a spot where the Steelers could get a little bit of pressure on the quarterback, could maybe force some turnovers. There's a lot of viable cheap defenses this week. Like, I think the Titans are at home against the Bills and could potentially face Matt Barkley. So they're in play for a cheap defense. You got the Chargers facing the Broncos at home. You got the Panthers facing the Jaguars at home. There's so many good cheap defenses this week, and probably won't be paying up for any of the expensive ones. Definitely like the Steelers, though, all the way down there at the bottom for 2,100. But yeah, guys, these are some of my favorite plays for this Week 5 slate. Hopefully, you guys did enjoy the video. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you drop a like on this video before you get out of here, and let me know down in the comments who are some of your favorite plays for this Week 5 slate. And like I said at the beginning, if you want to see how my picks did last week, I do upload a recap video either Sunday night or Monday morning where I cover my picks, talk about how my picks did, the good ones and the bad ones. I go over my lineups, who I played, talk about my lineups and how they did as well. So make sure you check out my recap video for Week 4 if you missed it, and make sure you check out my recap video for the Week 5 slate either this Sunday night or Monday morning. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, click the notification bell so that way you never miss out on any of my new videos. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you in the next one. Good luck this week. Peace.